Thanks, everyone. Hi. My name's Andrew Guy, otherwise known as A Guy, and jokes on my parents. And this is my trans story. And Lisa, we're having words that you put me on after the high hill skipper after this. That's all I can say. Okay, we're going to shift gears here. Who here believes in serendipity? You know, that idea when you think of somebody and they call, or it's Thursday morning, you've got minus $10 in your account and you get paid tonight and you put on your coat from last winter and there's a 20. Arts, you'll get it if you work in the arts. Or getting the perfect park at the supermarket right by the door, those sort of things. So tonight my story is a story of serendipity. When a certain amount of people came into my life at a particular time and formed a whole series of events that I could have never imagined or came up with if I'd ever tried. That basically turned into a really important part at the end of my transition. So let's go back. August 2013. Not sure if we all remember where we were then. COVID, Trump, marriage equality, words that were pretty non-familiar to us a while ago. I've just returned home from my long and difficult trip to San Francisco for my 12-hour final gender affirmation procedure and 6-week recovery time. I'm pretty exhausted, but I have to say I'm actually relieved because I'm at peace within my body for the first time that I could ever speak of, and I can't even articulate really what that feeling is. It just is. I do, unfortunately, also have a minor $100,000 medical debt that needs paying back to my dad, who lovingly loaned me the money at the request of my late mother's best friend and bridesmaid who I'd reached out to for help. So now I'm home and I'm resting, but tonight I'm at a really good friend's house. We're at his 3-story swish Surrey Hills terrace. I'm on the couch, still with some limbs elevated in all sorts of weird and wacky ways, and it's cold outside, and we're feeling really cosy. You can hear the rain behind us on the French doors. He's given me a champagne in one hand, and we have a lovely dinner waiting for us after this very essential episode of his AbFab DVD. And he says, "I'm Eddie and you're Patsy when we film our trans version." Yeah, okay, that works, sure. And then he strikes a more serious tone and says, "So what are you going to do?" I'm like, "About what?" He's like, "Oh, geez, you're a funny guy. About the loan to your dad, you know, the guy you don't speak to very much at the moment." "Don't worry, that gets better." Yeah, that. I don't know, go back to work, I guess. Feeling really sick at the thought, to be honest. And he says, "Well, funny guy, I've got a friend at the LGBTI Alliance who might be able to help. You should speak to her." I was like, "Great, that sounds amazing, thank you. Good, now eat." So it's a few weeks later, and he's arranged a meeting for me. I'm walking down King Street, Newtown, getting all confused with the numbers. It's cold and raining again, and I'm running late, which is normal, only 10 minutes this time. To say I don't even know what yet, to be honest. And I finally find the door and go upstairs, and I'm sitting on the couch to be greeted by this somewhat Nicole Kidman-esque, tall, blonde person who, I have to say, I'm like, of course this would be who my friend would be, suggesting that I tell my really personal predicament to and ask for help. So he would be certainly chuckling about this himself. Luckily though, she took me inside to one of her colleagues who was a transgender-related health worker, so a fellow open-minded, hearted trans man, who, coincidence, was in a relationship with a medical student at the time who was actually about to go over to San Francisco to intern with the surgeon I saw. So he was actually really excited to speak to me and hear about my experience and said, "Oh, I'm really looking forward to when we can have this in Australia." And yeah. So we had a lovely chat, not much to do with me, which was great. And then he said, "Look, I'm not sure if this would work, but there's this thing called an act of grace payment in the federal government's finance division. You could apply to that, go home and Google it." So I left feeling mildly optimistic, but also wildly suspicious. I mean, surely it's not that simple. Just go and ask the Liberal government's finance department. Yes. Good one, thanks. Anyway, no, I did go home and Google it, so just a little bit of information here for us. Act of grace. The Australian government can make an act of grace payment if the decision maker considers it appropriate because of special circumstances. If you make a request, you need to explain why you consider it to be a special circumstance. For example, a non-corporate Commonwealth entity has taken action or failed to take action, and this has caused an unintended or inequitable result for you. Or the Australian government legislation or policy has had an unintended, inequitable, or otherwise unacceptable impact on you. So I thought about this, and to be honest, just cut to the chase. I applied, and all I said was, why are the relevant Australian medical associations ignoring this medical need in the country? A few months later, I got a response, somewhat surprised that I did, because thinking that they'd probably just shred it or bin it or have a joke. They said, the Department of Health needs to look at this, apply to the Medical Treatment Overseas program, again, something I didn't know existed, and come back if they can't help. So the Medical Treatment Overseas program provides financial assistance for Australians to receive proven medical treatment overseas where effective treatment is not available in Australia. I again applied, putting together more of a medical thesis as was the requirement, under the guise of my health practitioner here in Australia though, who said, Andy, don't get your hopes up, because he knew this department doesn't pay transgender related surgery submissions. And that is very true, they don't. My Christmas present that year was a letter in the post. My procedure didn't meet their criteria. It was deemed by the relevant medical associations that I was in remission, not cured of gender dysphoria. Merry Christmas. And the most difficult part of this rationale was that I realised that I'd vaguely been set up, because this would then all go back to the Act of Grace Division, and all they had to say was, well, the Australian medical profession has given their opinion and they say you're not cured. Stumped. So I was a little bit down and out because I wasn't actually expecting this to happen, but then I got a little bit invested in it and thought that I might not have to spend the next 20 years paying my dad back. I was working as an usher in one of the theatres of Sydney, not quite sure what to do next, if anything. And I thought it was a matinee of Ghosts, but I've been corrected tonight. It was a matinee of an all-male version of Swan Lake. Actually, this next line, I'm not sure if this is right now. I was also a little bummed that day because I'd been positioned outside the theatre door rather than inside, because when you're inside, once everybody's seated, you can actually enjoy some of the show, so maybe. Today I was positioned at the entrance to look out for latecomers and help them come in, because once the show's locked out, you need to usher people in quickly. And this was one of about 12 places in the theatre that you could be positioned in that I probably was placed 3 times over the space of 2.5 years. And there was one late runner that day. I let her in. I thought I recognised her, but I wasn't sure. And then, to be honest, there's no time to find out, so you just, get in. And then a few days later, I get a Facebook friend request from a person named Ali, and she said, "Look, do you work in the theatre? I'm not sure, but if you let me in, did you let me in the other day? I wasn't sure if it was you, but if it was you, you look great." And it turns out Ali is a good friend of kind of an ex of mine who'd come over to my house for a barbecue 15 years ago. Yeah, this is really true. So I accepted her friend request and was like, "Yeah, that's actually me. Amazing. How are you?" And she said, "Well, I'm well. I've just returned from overseas and I'm just starting my Masters in Social Justice and Human Rights Law." Who else is running late to a matinee than a lawyer with clients who's very busy? But it's okay, Ali's here tonight. She was half an hour early, so I've forgiven her for making me have to do my job that day. Thank you. I worked up the courage to ask her. I said, "Look, I've just applied to the medical division in Canberra for some reimbursement of my overseas treatment. And look, their response isn't great. Do you think you could have a read of it and see what you think?" And she kindly did, and she calls me a few days later. I'm on the bus heading into the theatre again, and she says, "Look, firstly, of course, I'm talking today as your friend, not your solicitor. Of course, look, I really don't know what to make of this. I don't think you can use terminology relating to cancer in your case, but look, I'm not well researched in the area. Call up Justice Connect and see what they have to say." Again, an organisation I didn't know existed. More information. Justice Connect is an organisation that helps people and community groups connect with legal advice so everyone has a fair chance at a better life. So I called. "Hi Joe, I'm Andrew. A friend of mine who's a solicitor suggested I call you." And I ran through the story again, and she said, "Well, It sounds like this could have greater community benefit, and that it might be something that they could accept as a case if it met their criteria, and that she'd get back to me if it did. A week later, I'm on the bus again, going into the theatre, and she calls to say, yes, it has met their criteria. And what happens now is that they reach out to law firms to see if anybody would be interested in accepting the case. No guarantees, obviously, Andrew, don't get your hopes up. No. And then I spent a lot of time working, obviously, and more on my couch just really thinking about this with a lot of nerves of rejection and thoughts of optimism of maybe this could in some weird way work out. But then also really conflicted with how much of this I wanted to share with a whole lot of government and corporate people, and whether this was actually the right thing to be pursuing at all. Maybe this was just a lot easier to let go, you know? So a couple of months went by and I began to think she'd had no luck, and she called me back and said, oh look, I'm still trying, I'll be in touch. And then another couple of months went by again, and my hopes began to dwindle, and just started thinking, okay, just get back to work, Andrew. And then once again, I'm on the bus heading into the theatre and my phone rings. Andrew, it's Joe. Look, I'm so sorry with how long it's taken me to get back to you. Today's actually my last day and I've just been really frantically trying to tie up everything. And look, I'm really sorry for this. The way this works is that we ask 3 law firms and then we have to close the case. And unfortunately, I didn't have any luck with the 3 I tried. Oh no, Joe, that's okay. Look, it was a long shot. I really appreciate you trying. You've done so much. I really appreciate it. But I did with the 6th, Andrew. The 6th firm accepted your case. They'll be in touch. Good luck with everything. I hope it works out. I still don't know who Jo is to this day, where she is, what she's doing, or what compelled her to keep calling, because not everybody would have. So my solicitors call. They're based in Perth. They've assigned a partner, an associate, and a junior associate to the case. And we spoke many times, and it was really humbling to have such warm, intelligent people who knew the law that were willing to argue the point that a gender transition is a process of healing and authenticity, not a mental disorder that could return like a cancer. So together we spent the next year and a half submitting what felt like every medical report about this procedure and the results on a patient's mental health from Belgium, Serbia, the UK, the USA, Canada, Germany, France, Argentina, Iran, and Brazil, going back and forth with the health department who kept arguing the points, requesting more studies. And all the while, I'm not sure, but I think they were updating their criteria to make this less possible again in the future, rather than recognising that this is an actual health need and working it into the system to accommodate a minority community that also does pay taxes. So, the thing that I'd also realised is that this had been done retrospectively, and I was happy and healthier and leading a better life for myself that they seemed to just actively ignore from the beginning. And I'd found some conviction at this point because I had been resigned to this not working out a few years ago, but I had a few nights to think about this. And if there was ever a word that I was really beginning to be a little aggravated by, it was that word remission. You see, unfortunately, my mum, who I think actually is responsible for this entire insane story, she died of breast cancer after a long 11-year battle and never actually made it into remission. So it really began to dawn on me of like how offensive this actually was, knowing that they would have read that in my medical history reports. So I really do try to find the good in people, but I didn't like these people very much. Low blow. So another 6 months went by and I received a call from the solicitors. The department had reviewed everything we'd submitted and they'd made their decision. They weren't willing to look at any further submissions, so stop applying, stop bugging us, Andrew, and they'd hoped they'd helped. So 26th of June, no, not the solicitors, the department. The solicitors weren't saying stop bugging us. They were lovely. Then my letter. 27th of June 2016. Dear Mr. Guy, regarding the appeal of the decision not to provide financial assistance under the Medical Treatment Overseas program. I'm writing with regard to your appeal of the decision made by the Medical Treatment Overseas program on the 12th of December 2014. I note your application was received on the 18th of June of 2014 to not approve your application based on the criteria based on the fact that it did not meet all 4 mandatory criteria. Your appeal was received on the 16th of February 2016 and has now been considered by the Commonwealth's Chief Medical Office. Taking into account all of this additional information, I consider the treatment you received in Australia prior to your trip to San Francisco did not alleviate your condition. I have approved assistance for your treatment. On the evidence, I can confirm that your case meets the criteria. The department then did, of course, spend the next few months scrutinising every receipt I gave them, but I did receive a reimbursement and I did pay my father back. So, it's 3 years later. I'm feeling a little bit lighter in myself. A lot's changed for the better. There's a lovely amount of trans stories in the media, which I'm really enjoying. However, tonight I'm mildly frustrated by what our PM is saying about trans youth. So, without anybody to stop my drunk dial-up for a wine or two, I write to the Morrison government. Something I don't really mention that often as well is that, well, Scotty from marketing used to actually be my boss about 15 years ago. I never actually spoke to him back then, but I emailed anyway to remind him of who I was. Scotty, I've bloody well been to hell and back, mate, and I don't think you're getting this quite right. I think we should meet, and I'll just enlighten you a bit. Not at all expecting a reply again, and really not even sure if every word made sense. A month later, I was invited to meet with his chief of staff for 15 minutes. We had 12 minutes on the day after some room mess-ups, but I did stay. I basically summarised a lot of the problems within trans healthcare in Australia as best as I could. And then COVID's happened, which is quite ironic with how amazing our Australian health system actually has shown itself to be. So I will be staying in touch with them and hopefully will bring you my trans story part 2 in the years to come. Thanks.